I'm bored. What shall we do, lads? Well, let's have a fire. Capital idea, Matthew. Let's have a fire. A really big one. We've got a great wind, haven't we? It's been blowing for days. Everything's dry. Then go up. Holy smoke. Now, what do we need? Well, we need kindling. What's kindling? Well, gorse. Yeah, dried gorse. They call it first. I've got some embers here. I hear you haven't managed to light your fire, have you? It's easy with red hot embers. Now, where's your furs? Over here. Right? Let's put a shovel in the top and wood!
Most of us are aware that there was a fire in Buckingham sometime in its past history. But not many of us quite realise the devastating impact it had on the future of the town, geographically, economically, culturally and politically. We asked several local residents of Buckingham about what they knew of the fire.
So what do I know about the Great Fire of Buckingham? I know it happened, and I only know that because this little one studied it at Bolton Meadow Primary School and came back and told me a little bit about it.
I know it took place in the sort of centre of Market Hill and the High Street, and a lot of properties got wiped out. I don't really know which of the current buildings were original and how many of them have obviously been replaced.
What do I know about the Great Fire of Buckingham? Not much actually. I hadn't heard of it until my children came home from school and they had been learning about it, and they've been decorating tiles to do with the Great Fire of Buckingham.
Well, I know it was 200 or 300 years ago and it was quite devastating, but I really don't know much more than that.
In early spring of 2023, Ed Grimsdale, Carolyn Cumming and Lionel Weston decided that this highly important event in the town's history needed to be commemorated. Various groups and individuals were contacted to help plan this significant community project.
So I was contacted because I work at the Buckingham Men in Sheds. We were asked to help out with the project to build the model of the town prior to the fire. And that's exactly what we've done. So we've built some baseboards and taken them to the Rotary team, who then built something on those baseboards. And I'm sure you'll hear all about that later.
So what did Buckingham look like in 1725?
We established that it was a much smaller town then, but the middle of the town was very similar to what it is today. So this gave us a good starting point. And with using a scale of 1 to 500, we were able to fit the entire town of 300 years ago into a relatively small space, as you see here.
Each section has got approximately a similar number of buildings on it. The idea of them being able to separate them and pass one section to one of the schools in Buckingham.
With a great deal of difficulty was certainly the problem being that that's the sort of standard house we're working on. But the problem is Buckingham has a whole variety of types of houses. Some are thatched, some have overhangs, some don't have overhangs, some have two double overhangs, and some were single story and some 3 stories. So the problem was we produced a variety of wooden blocks showing the different styles of houses and the different heights. But then to get an impression of the outside, we went to photographs of some of the actual buildings that were around at the time, and then converting that into a diagram which represented simple with a white wood framed house. But with that design scaled down by computer to the actual same size as the blocks, the task became a lot easier. And so that's really what I was involved in, and the children with their areas of the board.
So we involved 4 year 6 schools locally, and we took the boards to them with some basic instructions as to what they had to do, and we gave them the wooden blocks and the photographs of the houses and explained that they had to assemble them somehow demonstrate the burnt houses and put them in the right places in the roads, which they managed to do with little help from us. And they did a jolly good job. They're very enthusiastic, and you can see the wonderful results.
Ed Grimsdale, the town's esteemed local historian, helps source details about people who played an important role in the events of March the 15th, 1725.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I will walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff comfort me.
Children, I am not well. I ask for your quiet attention just for a few minutes. For 70 years I have lived in this town bearing a heavy burden, and I cannot keep this secret any longer. You have heard of the Great Fire of Buckingham 1725? Oh, nobody except my late mother knows the truth of who started that fire that burnt down 138 homes and left so many of the town's residents without a roof over their heads. Children, it was I, a teenage chambermaid. That's right. It was my fault. And I have lived with the shadow of the death and destruction that's racked my brain day and night ever since. It was a windy March day, and there were 2 boys, Henry and George, in the yard at the back of the Unicorn Inn. They were trying to set fire to a bunch of twigs and leaves with steel and flint, without any success. And I said to them, I know an easier way. I'll gather some burning kindling from one of the grates in the inn. And I came back a few moments later with a foot-long stick aglow. But the more I walked and the more the wind set fire to the stick until I had a burning torch. Henry grabbed the torch and flung it into the twigs and leaves, and up they flew like aerial bombs, landing on the thatched roofs of the houses and the inns around. And the fire was so rapid. Within minutes, it was so intense. It could not be stopped or quenched. The Unicorn Inn was the first major building to be razed to the ground on that day.
Oh yay! Oh yay! Oh yay! On Monday, March the 15th, in the year of our Lord, 1725, a great fire befell our town, destroying 138 houses, bays and livelihoods in its fearsome wake, driven forward on an easterly gale. Despite assistance and appliance sent from Winslow, nothing could prevent 1/3 of a town being destroyed. Buckingham, blessed by God's mercy, lost no lives, but 2 horses and 6 hogs perished in the inferno. Our vicar, the Reverend Oliver Patchler,
asks every Buckingham man and woman to mention in prayer those who are destitute or distressed. The town has suffered greatly, and we must come together to ensure future prosperity for one and all. Long live our King George, who before leaving for Hanover was pleased to order £500 in money and £500 in timber to be given to our town towards repairing the losses sustained in our late dreadful fire. God save the King!
The local history group worked hard in trying to locate any current residents who could trace their ancestors back to 1725.
Well, the Stutchbury family were brewers since the Norman times in the area, and Paynes Court was the site of the brewery for Thomas Alfred Stutchbury in 1725, and in the family history it mentions the Fire of Buckingham. Thomas Alfred Stutchbury owned a set of owned the brewery, also owned several pubs up to the White Hart, down to the Mitre, in Gorcut, in Brackley, and many other villages. The one I love the most is the Mitre, because I spend a lot of time in there. And he basically brewed beer and sold beer to the community, which was the stock and trade of the family at that time.
Following the fire, many of those rendered homeless needed some form of emergency refuge. Whilst the workhouse and friendly neighbours helped some, most ended up in the fields of Page Hill living under makeshift, inadequate shelters. Months later, a lucky few were given the opportunity of moving into the newly constructed red houses in the area we now know as North End. One such person was Old Sal.
They calls me Old Sal, but yous can call me Sal. There'd been a terrible gale blowing in from the east for days. The fire started behind the house at the sign of the Unicorn on High Street. The old man and me, we lived a mile away. "That will be fine," said me old man. The next I knew, our young sled burst in with such force he tore the door off its hinges. "Fire, fire!" Well, our small home filled with dense smoke. As I swooned and fainted, I yelled the ending nigh. I awoke much later, all in a mizzy-mozzy, staring up at a blue sky. I was all alone, strapped to our door. I learned, see, that me old man and my dear boy had whipped off that very door that our young sled had so pulled down. And then, masked with wet cloths, they carried me through our fiery town up to Page Hill. Soon after, they and our young Sal lumbered up the hill like the stream Magi, bringing gifts of tarpaulin, withy canes, and a warm meal. I was so happy to give up the promised land for a poor tent and a lady's talk with my loving daughter. Mind you, mister, living in a tent on Page Hill was as cold as a snowball stuck on the North Pole. Spare my language, but Jesus Christ, and the old man and me thrilled when us were chosen by the charity land to live in these new houses down below at the end of the square by the pump, which we'd been walking up and down to for 6 months from Page Hill with our rusty pails. Viscount Cobham of Stowe got these red buildings built. Some folks say he got money from the king for wooden stuff. God bless his soul. Well, bless me, but me old man said we had to go to church, which he did once a year, regular, at harvest time. He said, we must give thanks to our Lord. And the good Lord, too. You see, mister, it's a roof over our heads, and we feels warm, and we's at home.
Unfortunately, the red houses were not fit for purpose and were eventually pulled down. This caused a great deal of consternation within the community, and one such outspoken critic was Brown Willis, the locally elected MP. He feared that Buckingham had missed an opportunity to re-establish its position and status as the county town. Willis advocated for a much more positive and forward-thinking approach to the town's rebuild.
I have greatly loved both the people and town of Buckingham since I was first elected to be their MP in 1705. Last year, 1725, March the 15th to be precise, the town suffered an appalling calamity. A great fire swept away all in its path, leaving 600 desolate souls without home or shelter. Buckingham Council is dominated by Tories and is a pocket borough in the interests of the Temple Grenville family of Stowe House. Their involvement in the town is trifling, to say the least. Without national support, we cannot contemplate the cost of rebuilding from scratch as Warwick did over 30 years ago. Why, if it were left to local money, it would mean repatching and repairing house by house, brick by brick, an impossible task. Besides, the old medieval street plan would be a break on the future status and growth of the town. I have repeatedly warned that Aylesbury is growing ever quickly, and its patrons are determined to seize the county town status away from Buckingham. This would, in my humble opinion, be a blow from which Buckingham might never recover. I give you Buckingham and its future.
Bishop Reynolds circulated this letter to all his clergy across the extensive diocese of Lincoln, in the expectation of raising funds for our benighted town. The Vicar of Buckingham would have read this epistle from the pulpit of the old parish church, about where I'm standing now. Good brother, you will with this receive His Majesty's most gracious letters patent, for making a charitable collection in favour of the poor sufferers by fire at Buckingham. Their loss is very great. More than 130 families there being reduced to the last extremities. These poor people stand commended to the rest of the kingdom, fair traders, faithful subjects, helpful to such as wanted, and to other great towns, a very good example. But besides this general commendation, being of the same church and diocese with ourselves, I trust that you and your well-disposed parishioners will have a more tender feeling of their present distress and express it in the proper manner on this occasion. It is an unkind observation made by some that applications of this sort are much increased of late years, but it is certain that the wealth of the nation is, by the grace of God, much more increased, and you, I hope, will not be wanting. I pray God to have you and your parish under his most gracious protection, and remain your truly loving brother.
Henry Roundell, published historian, was rector of Buckingham Parish Church from 1853 to 1862. Henry died aged 41 on December the 26th, 1864. I do not forget the Great Fire of 1725, which destroyed nearly half the town. But then, when the streets and homes were rebuilt by a singular perversity, they were rebuilt after their former fashion, and instead of springing from her ashes, vigorous and young, a renovated phoenix, Buckingham, after the fire, rose up the counterpart of Buckingham before it.